Hi, everyone, and I admire your resilience and perseverance in staying for this last panel, but we hope to make a good one for you. So I'm James Sanders, and I thought I would take a moment to, well, first of all, I just want to say we had an extraordinary panel. I'm going to allow each of the panelists to give us a one-sentence description of who they are, but basically we have Nick Karalis at the far end there. We have Nancy Sutley, Deputy Mayor. We have Hilary Norton, State Transportation Commissioner, and of course you, I'm guessing by now, know who John Rossant is. I thought I would just take a minute before we start the conversation to frame it, because this panel really emerges in large part out of a project that we've been working on for about 5 years. And the we in this case is Woods Bagot, which is a global architecture firm, which is whose CEO is Nick Karalis. And we have produced a new volume, a new book, which is here, and copies will be available later. It's called Renewing the Dream, The Mobility Revolution and the Future of Los Angeles. It's published by Sutley, and it consists of data studies, architecture projects, and contributed essays by a remarkable group, including people like Francis Anderton, Greg Lindsay, Donald Shoup, and others. And we got involved in this because we really felt, and this is why we feel this panel is an exciting one, that the city is really at a pivotal moment. We borrow Christopher Hawthorne's idea. He refers to the third Los Angeles. We call it Los Angeles 3.0 to give it a little tech spin. But if you imagine that the city that was built up before World War II, the city of Roger Rabbit, the city of streetcars and boulevards, an enormous sprawling city with a 2 million population, that was LA 1.0. LA 2.0, of course, was the freeway and tract house model city that was developed in Los Angeles after World War II, which, after all, became the model of modern cities just about everywhere in the world from, let's say, 1945 to the beginning of the 21st century. But we're not in that city anymore. We're in a new city where lots is changing, and nowhere is it changing more than in the world of mobility and the relationship of mobility to urban fabric. So we began thinking about those changes and what they meant. And what I thought I would do today in terms of structuring the event, I thought I'd ask our panel a little bit generally about, we've picked the time frame of 5 years, which takes us very neatly to 2028, which, as most of you know, is when the World Olympics, the Olympic Games will be coming to Los Angeles for the first time since 1984. So we have our time horizon, shall we say, is 5 years. I thought I'd ask the panel a few questions generally about what they see as the future of the city. But then I thought we could use mobility as a kind of armature to discuss the many aspects. What I thought we'd do is focus on maybe 4 aspects of the city's future. The obvious one, or one of the obvious ones, being housing, another being jobs and economic development, third being sustainability, and a fourth being the Olympics themselves, which will sort of bring us full circle. So I'm now going to take my seat over here. I mean, this really is an extraordinary moment because not only we have the years leading up to the Olympics, but we are sitting on top of the incredible legislation that has been passed over the past few years under President Biden. So I'm going to ask you questions about the future of LA. I'm going to start with you, Nick. Nick runs Woods Bagot. Woods Bagot is a global architecture firm. They have studios in 17 cities around the world. They have every major city in Los Angeles and in Australia and Shanghai and Beijing and Hong Kong and London and New York and San Francisco, Abu Dhabi. You could be anywhere in the world, but you chose 5 years ago to make your newest office in Los Angeles. What did you see? What do you see as the future of LA? Why did you put that bet on Los Angeles in terms of a place to put your future for your firm?
Well, James, in 2018, I met both yourself and John, and we had this amazing conversation under an olive tree around the optimism around which the mobility revolution could really tackle things that I'm fascinated with, which is urbanism, architecture, and humanism. And we don't talk a lot about the corollary of the mobility revolution, to what it really does fundamentally for the human experience. So that LA was fascinating to us as a city to come and occupy, because it obviously pioneered since the Second World War this ideal state of the California dream. And our book is aptly named Renewing That Dream. And that's why we thought California and LA in particular really delivered the mythology of suburbia precipitated by mobility, right? And consequentially to that, as I was talking to yourself and John and listening to what the potentiality of mobility is, not only with decarbonisation and by access and by all sorts of other criteria, it could profoundly influence the new notion of what LA is for Angelenos, but in a way that from an architectural and a humanistic point of view, we were trying to understand how this great city could inspire cultural nuances specific to the craziness of LA, to its complexity, to its richness, to its 100 districts or how many cities. How could that really provide insights for us that we could use in terms of the idea of what is new urbanism and how it can be really an optimistic characteristic of urbanization and occupation. Also, I think the resistance of Los Angeles to density. You guys hate density. Just like passionately. You hate
used
it.
to anyway.
Well, used to. And density is for us a kind of a substantive methodology for which sustainability and community and all these other things that are kind of in our social consciousness, LA was the ability to be using as a new melting pot or a new laboratory of ideation to help other cities that we're working on at the moment. So it really was an ability to look backwards, to look at the mess, the beautiful mess somebody said today, and how that beautiful mess can sort of crystallize into something that we all still enjoy, and make sure that Angelenos all have your same toys that you've loved with, but live in a different place. So that's why Los Angeles was fascinating as a melting pot.
Let me throw it open now to the other panelists in terms of the coming 5 years, in terms of the opportunities that you see for the city, but also the challenges that you see. What's your, nobody can predict the future, but what's your roadmap for what you see happening? Particularly, could be about mobility, but more generally as well.
Let's see. Why don't I jump in here then? So a couple of things. I think from my vantage point in City Hall, working on sustainability, climate change is the urgent crisis that confronts us, as well as a number of other crises that we have to confront: a lack of housing, not just a lack of affordable housing, but a lack of housing generally. And how and all of those things relate. So I take a little bit of exception to the idea that Los Angeles doesn't like density. I mean, I know there's a lot of mythology around no growth and lots of influential policymakers who talk about that, but that's in fact what's happened. I live about less than 2 miles from here. Close enough to Dodger Stadium to walk to a baseball game, so accidentally maybe we had a downtown stadium long before many communities around the country had a downtown stadium. It doesn't have the best transit access, but it is a downtown stadium. So when I think about sustainability, there's the pieces of it that are, how do we decarbonize our economy? How do we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions? The city owns a lot of the infrastructure, and a lot of the other carbon intensive infrastructure is in public ownership. Whether it's Metro with its several thousand buses, the Port of Los Angeles, the airport. The Department of Water and Power, and so embracing the vision of a zero carbon city to get to zero carbon by 2050. There's a lot that we have to do, including decarbonizing the grid. And how a decarbonized electric grid helps to enable zero carbon transportation, zero carbon buildings. So I think by the time the Olympics arrive here in 2028, what's already happening here in terms of mobility and electrifying mobility and giving people choices other than a internal combustion engine vehicle, I think will be sort of in full bloom. And when it comes to issues like housing, again, the regional housing assessment, regional housing needs assessment basically said build all the housing in the city of Los Angeles. Not quite. All of that's going to be infill because we are a fully built out city. So if you go to, if you walk around downtown, if you go to my neighborhood, if you go to Hollywood, if you go to many other parts of Los Angeles, you will see that infill happening and the reuse happening. So I think 5 years from now, when the Olympics arrive, you will see the same spirit that makes Los Angeles a wonderful place to live. That our diversity is our strength, but you'll see it supercharged. How's that?
Sounds great to me. Hilary, what are your thoughts on where the city is going over the next 5 years? Before we dive down, we're going to have a little more specific questions, but before we do,
Sure.
give us an overview.
Well, because I'm one of the California Transportation Commissioners, and for those of you who are not from California, we spend the gas tax money, and that's $5 to $8 billion a year on how are we going to transform our mobility system. I live in a house that will be 100 years old in 2028. Mm-hmm. I live in Eagle Rock, which is one of the streetcar communities that was built along a streetcar line. We have been part of the communities that have been fighting for bus rapid transit that will be open by 2028. We want to have, for me, my ideal would be that Los Angeles has the best Paralympics ever. And that Paralympics is fueled by zero-emission transportation, like a streetcar downtown, an aerial tram that can go to Dodger Stadium, that can hook up to a number of the Paralympic events. And I aspire that we will have transformed our goods movement network from what we have now, which is mostly diesel, to EV and hydrogen. And I aspire that we really make good on the downtown LA 2040 plan, where 1% of the land is going to have 30% of our future residential density and 20% of our entire density. And if we do that right, it's going to be extraordinary. And one of the best chapters in your book I'm excited about is transforming the gas stations into community assets that can be housing, that can be EV charging, that can transform our region and really make it something where people come to LA and say, I never expected it to be so clean, so multimodal, and that the Paralympics are going to be the biggest, well-attended, but they're going to have the most inspired mobility for people who are in wheelchairs and are living life independently and adapted athletes, and we're going to be so proud of that.
Fantastic. Before I go to you, we should explain that in 2020, Woods Bagot was asked by the then Chief Design Officer of the City of Los Angeles, Christopher Hawthorne, to join with this group of, I must say, very distinguished other groups, other architecture practices from around the world, to think about something that we hadn't thought about and was wonderful to jump in on it, which was that, Governor Newsom has declared that as of 2035, 11 years from now, there will be no gasoline-powered cars or trucks sold in the state of California. There are 550 gas stations in the city of Los Angeles, just the city, not the metropolitan area. There's probably another twice that in the metropolitan area. What happens to those gas stations when you don't need to go to the corner? As we all know, EVs do not require, if you historically think about it, The idea that you were going to take one of the most flammable materials in the world and thousands, millions of people every day were going to pour high octane stuff into their cars by themselves obviously required enormous amount just basically of separation and isolation from the rest of the world. If there were a fire, you didn't want to be anywhere near it. So we built this incredible infrastructure, these 550 large sites, and usually very good sites. They're usually on big streets. Very often, as we all know in LA, they're on the corner of two big streets. So we did a sort of a provocation of what could happen. Where are those sites? What kind of sites are there, and what could be done with them? So that's one of the things that we cover. But let's go back to John. What's your big picture of the next 5 years in Los Angeles?
Well, to talk about the next 5 years, I'll maybe dial back and talk about what happened 7 years ago and why we decided to come to Los Angeles.
Yes, that's
we
good
took
way
the
to put
view.
it.
We took the view, and I continue to take the view that we are in the very first stages of a profound mobility revolution, which is a very deep transformation in the way goods and people, above all, move around cities. Whether it's decarbonizing mobility, but introducing new modes of mobility, whether it's things that fly in the air, vehicles that go underground, et cetera, gondolas, et cetera. For a century and a half, we were limited in the number of modes of mobility in any given city. And now there's been this, what I like to think of sometimes is this sort of Cambrian explosion of, when we had sort of single cell organisms, suddenly you had mammals and invertebrates and blah, blah, blah. And we're sort of in the first stages of that. That was one thing that we thought. The other thing was that we felt very strongly that Los Angeles, the city of the car, the city that birthed car culture to the world, the city of the freeway, was going to lead the mobility revolution. And if you go back 7 years, actually 8 years, 2016, you had the LA Department of Transportation, it becoming really the first city in the world to issue a roadmap on organizing mobility and transportation digitally and using data. And we were so in advance of this. And now cities around the world have adopted that. We had a mayor who talked about LA as the transportation technology capital of the world.
And as an incubator.
And it's an incubator. In 2016 also, and thanks to the great efforts of Hilary and many others, voters passed Measure M that has given us this great rollout of public transit in LA. 7 years later, I'm a little concerned, frankly. I would, we're committed to LA, but will LA continue to lead the mobility revolution? And I think there's a big question mark about that. I absolutely support the mayor in her commitment to prioritizing housing, which should have been done years ago. But I think that housing and mobility are so intimately connected. We cannot de-emphasize the importance of mobility and transportation in the city. And we're at a really quite critical moment. We can't just blithely say, well, we're going to have the Olympics in 5 years or 6 years. Everything's going to work out and it'll be really cool. And it will, we'll pull them off. I have no doubt about that. But I would like to see Los Angeles leading this revolution. And we have the legitimacy to do so. We're electrifying faster than any other area of the country. You have a lot of the key EV companies are based here. This is the city that birthed micromobility in 2017 with the launch of Bird. You can argue whether that was a success or not, but it happened here. LA is the aerospace capital of the nation, and I think the next big part of the mobility revolution is going to take place in the third dimension, above our heads. And we're not going to see tens and thousands of these things buzzing around, but it will have an impact, and it's other countries are working on it very, very rapidly. I would, as an American citizen, I love my country. As an adopted Angelino, I would like us to lead that revolution. and I'm worried that we might fall behind. So I do really have some big concerns now, frankly. But look, I totally agree. I mean, now the hard work is being done. I mean, Measure M is we're spending that money very wisely. We see it. I mean, right here is the Metro super connector. It's amazing. It's beautiful. I love it. We want to see that all over the city. So the hard work's being done. We have the people mover coming on stream at LAX, etc. But I want us to be a little bit more ambitious and more visionary. And I think we need to kind of weigh the words we use in talking about all of this. So yeah, so I'm optimistic about the next 5 years. But again, I would like to see us lead. So
Could
Well,
I just
yeah,
add something? Because
please, go.
the thing that I know the mayor's focused on, and I think as a city we need to focus on, is making sure that revolution meets everybody. Equity, environmental justice, climate justice are incredibly important issues in a city like Los Angeles, where we have a population that's incredibly diverse in every sense of the word. Whether it's cultural, economic, and the danger is that we leave people behind, and we can't do that. We have to make the revolution for everyone.
could I just, I couldn't agree more, but I would say that the thing about transportation and mobility is that it employs tens of thousands of people, and it brings economic prosperity to this and well-paying jobs, as our president likes to say. I mean, that's about equity. That's giving people jobs. So, yeah.
Well, I think there is a big concern. We're sort of jumping all over the map, but that's kind of great. We're touching on so many different topics, and one of the ones I wanted to discuss, and this came out a little bit of my conversation with Hilary, about mobility and jobs, which is an obvious subject. On the one hand, you need good mobility as a driver of economic development, in just the basic sense, to make the pie bigger, to make sure that companies want to be here, that from their point of view, the employer's point of view, that their job market is accessible to them, and that it's an encouraging place for startups and so forth. But on the other hand, really to Nancy's point, it's crucial that people be able to get to their jobs, and that can be really tough for various different kinds of groups. And so why don't we just jump in on that? I mean, lots of people can't afford cars, and it doesn't seem like it in the city of Los Angeles, but it does have the by far largest bus network of any city in the United States. And it's not part of the mythology of Los Angeles, but it's a part of the reality of Los Angeles. And it's a great thing we have this bus network and so forth, but it doesn't work as well as it could, and there's still lots of people, whether we have gender issues, we've got class issues, we've got racial and all kinds of issues, or it's an issue of disabilities or whatever. So let's talk a little bit about reducing the friction, so to speak, or the mismatch between people who want to work and employers who want to hire them, and how do we get people, as much as possible for all those reasons.
I'd like to take that because we right now, with the federal money and the state money, should be back in the FDR, WPA type thinking. Everyone should have a job because of the amount of money that's here. And we've got to start, and I think this is to John's point, we've got to start telling ourselves we can do big things and we can do them fast. Why are we not doing them well and fast? We have the most skilled labor and great labor unions that know what they're doing and want to work. We have we have people at the helm that are the smartest they've ever been, and I think really committed to what is possible. We have companies that know what they're doing, and we have people who want to work. And I think what is exciting is if we can just embrace that we don't have a skills problem, we have a transportation and childcare problem. If we can get people to those jobs and make that our reason for living and getting up in the morning, we're really going to have done something, because we are still the country that built the Hoover Dam. We're still the country that built the SR-71, that Lockheed did that with in less than 6 months. We know how to build
In
things.
Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles, right. We know how to do things. We are a city of great big shoulders. And that's, even though that's Chicago, we know how to put big projects on our shoulders. And I think we've just got to talk ourselves back into that, because things take too long right now and they don't have to. And we've got to take as not standing on the sidelines, even if it's not our project, we've got to say that should get done. Why isn't it getting done? Why aren't we doubling our convention center? Why aren't we building some of these great projects? We've got to get on it and make it our business to get this done, so that in 5 years, everyone will say their lives were better, they made money, and make sure that people of color, women, everyone has had the opportunity to get a job. And I will say Mayor Bass is not enough commended for the work she did in the Congress to make it possible to have local hiring as part of federal contracts. You used to have to watch federal money get spent in your neighborhood, and you could have other contractors come in from other states, and that was perfectly fine. Mayor Bass made sure that you had to hire locally, and that was part of the prosperity agenda. And I can't wait to see that play out over and over and over with all the federal money that should be coming to us and all the state money that is coming to us.
Fantastic. Yes. Nancy, would you care to? I know this is such a crucial, important thing for the mayor.
Well, yeah, I think, I mean, we could take an example. I mean, talk about economic engines for this region. The ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, the San Pedro Bay ports, the largest port complex in the U.S. Almost half of the goods coming into the U.S. are coming in through the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Absolutely, that one of the most important economic engines. And yet, we all feel, right? We all feel the effect of it. If you live in Wilmington or San Pedro, or if you live in West Long Beach, if you live along the 710 corridor, if you live along, if you live near the warehouses in the Inland Empire, you're feeling the effects. The benefits, the economic benefits that come to the U.S. from trade are absorbed here in Los Angeles. And so, thinking big about how do we decarbonize the port, how do we reduce the smog. Doesn't matter who you are in Los Angeles, you're breathing the same smoggy air as everybody else, and you're stuck in the same traffic jam as everybody else. We have to make that system work better, and that's using the money that's available, that's using the tools and the technology that's coming. It's thinking about how goods move. So the Port of Los Angeles has signed an MOU with the Port of Shanghai. That is the busiest trade corridor coming into Los Angeles, called the Green Shipping Corridor, trying to get a zero carbon ship on the Shanghai to Los Angeles route by 2025, and to make most shipping on that route carbon free by zero carbon by 2030. Really try to think about sustainability in the way of these jobs are essential in Los Angeles. The economic benefits of trade that come to everyone in the U.S. from being able to access markets in Asia come through the Port of Los Angeles. We have to do a better job of relieving our residents' lungs of the burden of that important economic activity.
Thanks. Let's move on to another obviously urgent crisis of this city, as it is for many successful cities. I'm a New Yorker, and it's certainly an issue for New York, an issue for London. It's you might call it the ultimate price of success, which is a city which lots of people want to be in, and particularly lots of people of means want to be in, and ambitious young people want to be in, will be a city where housing is very expensive. This is reached a kind of crisis moment, though, I think, in Los Angeles that's really striking. We devoted the central part of our book to thinking specifically about the relationship of mobility and housing, particularly through the lens of parking. We have a chapter by Mark Valianatis, I don't know if he's here tonight, in which he draws the kind of very almost terrible history of what happened over the 20th century in which in the early 20th century, there were housing maximums. You couldn't have for parking. You couldn't have too much parking. They didn't want you to have too many spaces. And at some lurched-like moment in the 1930s, that turned into parking minimums. But nonetheless, they were still pretty reasonable. One space, off-street space per unit. You could do all kinds of interesting housing models with that. But after World War II, it became 2 spaces per unit. And then it was geometrically impossible to build all kinds of housing, the so-called missing middle that people talk about, something in between a big apartment house and a single-family community. And it just got worse from there. Obviously, in the last few years, there's been a lot of activity and a lot of energy being thought about how to change that and what to do about that. But I'd love to open it up generally to the topic of how do we build more housing and how does mobility relate to that when
James,
we start
can I
down there?
kick off? Because the study divulges some really interesting data that in this great city, there's 3.6 million curb car parking spots. There's 14% of your land area dedicated to parking cars on grade that for 95% of the time are doing this. 0. Absolutely 0. So we, with some of the case studies and analysis, without changing your density, and repurposing those gas stations, repurposing the lots that are occupied for that, we could easily add about 1.5 million additional homes. If we, Nancy, considered new ways of density, we could increase that to 2.2 million within not a great change of the FAR. So, but to do that, we need policy change. So we can talk all the great talk about the great things of decarbonisation and our ambitions to clean air and everything. Unless you change policy, won't happen. You'll just keep. But I'm optimistic, John, and that's why the book describes 9 fundamental policy changes as a result of the analysis of what we can do to change. But it does need policy change. It needs market force change. It needs us to stop building, the car park concrete base and the stick build. There's lots of things we can do differently, but it needs everybody and policy and politicians to go, if we're going to do it, reinvigorate John's enthusiasm for the mobility revolution, deliver Nancy's ability, it needs policy change.
I would also say on behalf of women, not that I speak for all women, but just a few, please, please, please build in, and I've seen your designs and they're amazing, build in a safer public realm for women. We have a transit system that we can't always use. We have terrible parking garages that are unsafe to walk in. We have the copper getting stolen out of streetlights, and so it is unsafe to walk in so many parts of the city. And if you can make the public realm safer, totally, we will move downtown. We will spend more time in places that are denser, but think about the public realm, because women, children, the elderly, people in wheelchairs and walkers, we need a safe public realm that goes with the density and the kind of inspired.
It's not just women. I was
want.
bashed walking from Hoxton to the Bradbury 2 mornings ago at 8 a.m. It's the whole culture of how you need density in people to create safety for all people. Yes. And then how you deal with the curb and make sure it's not intersected by cars crossing it for dropping off goods. Let's change those policies.
Yes, thank you.
Let's change our lane structure, and then that'll lead to safety and lead to access.
I mean, it's not only a design issue either. I mean, it's also just how we view safety, how we view enforcement. I mean, as the head of CoMotion, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of people coming to CoMotion LA from all around the world, from Europe and from other parts of the country, from the Middle East, and because they're people who care about mobility and transit, they come to LA. They want to experience transit and LA Metro, and it's heartbreaking sometimes when I hear like, John, it was like, the train was nice and the station was okay, but I just did not feel safe. And, half the compartment was homeless people. So again, thank God we have a mayor who is addressing that, is trying to address that. It's a really, really tough problem. but we've got to have a different attitude towards what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in our societies, I think. So,
Well, you can't house the homeless because your policy says thou shalt have this many cars. The homeless don't own cars, so why put in a policy that says, oh, we've got to solve it, but a homeless person has to have a car and pay for a car spot that they'll never use? That policy must change.
Well, there has
Sorry to look at this from the outside so deliberate, but it's crazy, right? You want to house your homeless, but you're forcing them to own a car, to own a house.
There has been
sense.
progress made with TOD and TOC, and we'd love to see that extended. And that's a good example of the sort of chicken and egg thing that, you build a station, you need people to be able to use the station, so you need density near the station. You can't get that density without the station, and it takes a while to build up. It is remarkable, as somebody who's been coming here for 30 years, to see change happens so slowly on an urban scale. But as someone who started coming here in the 80s, it's just astonishing to see the densification of Los Angeles, which is a real thing and is really happening all along the Expo line and down to the beach. And it's a remarkable thing. One bright spot in this story is downtown LA, which again I've been going to since the 1980s, and if you had told me, what it was going to look like now in 1985, I would say, well, what a lovely dream. What have you been smoking? I mean, we tell the story through an interview with Michael Manville, a UCLA professor who studied this more carefully than just about anybody else. And we put it in because we wanted to say to people say, what, are you dreaming about getting rid of parking in LA? You can't get rid of parking. People have to have places near their car. Well, a little known story, although many of you here probably know it, but the general public scarcely knows it, is that in 1999, Los Angeles, passed something called the Adaptive Reuse Ordinance, which was solving an issue which became a possibility, an opportunity, which is that Los Angeles had one of the greatest collections of pre-war office buildings in the United States, rivaling Manhattan. But they were scarcely being used. Some of them had sort of ground level uses and maybe a second floor, substantially empty. They could not be converted to residential use, as has happened in New York and everywhere up many other cities, because of those parking requirements. So they made a rule that for those buildings, you did not, if you wanted to convert to residential, you had to have no new parking, zero, not a single space. And the premise was there was plenty of inventory in downtown that you could use in different ways. You wouldn't have a parking space in your building, but you'd have one down the block. And it worked like a charm. This incredible explosion, the growth of downtown Los Angeles, which everyone in the world now, DTLA, knows about. Here we are in DTLA stage, which is not a phrase I think we would have used in 1988 or 91. That incredible explosion of not just residential units, something like 20,000 residential units built in the space of 20 years, or a little bit more, but the incredible energy that has come with it, the restaurants, the lounges, the hotels, the startups, the street life, all came from parking. Well, all come from parking, but it was like just this amazing lever, single policy change that was made. I tried to find out why it was done, and nobody could quite give me the answer. Ken Bernstein might have had something to do with it. Tom Gilmore might have had something to do with it. But it happened, and it turned out that it's an explosion. So I want to talk about that specifically, but I want to also ask you to put on your caps of what are those other levers that we could be turning to do things like that.
I think we need to have more supple, more creative, more aggressive changes in policy that happen quicker, so we could do these things more quickly. That Hilary is talking about. Sort of a little anecdote. A great actually Culver City-based startup, Envoy Technologies, came up with this wonderful idea of what do they call it? Community car sharing. So basically, car sharing is an amenity for developers. So if you develop a new apartment building, they'll go in and put electric chargers in the parking, and say 10 or 15 electric cars that are then shared by the tenants. Brilliant idea.
So many simple ideas.
It's a simple idea, but we needed policy changes to
Pull out.
support that.
Yeah.
We didn't get them. The result is Envoy had some problems, was snapped up by a Miami-based company called Blink, who are here, and it's being repurposed, and it will happen elsewhere. We need to see those kinds of things at scale, I think. Anyway.
But we have Blue LA here, which is now an EV car share program that's really aimed at owned by Blink. Well, the concession for that. It was started with a grant from the California Air Resources Board, was completely developed by the City of Los Angeles, by the Department of Transportation, working with others, and it's trying to concentrate those the cars and the chargers in low-income communities to give people access to zero-emission transportation. So, I think sometimes the secret of Los Angeles is finding the right person and with the right idea at the right time, and by sheer force of will and personality, things start to happen. So, I think there's a 1,000 different types of pilots like that and programs like that, and sometimes they're hard to see in a city this big, but they're out there.
I'm going to ask one last question to the panel, and then I thought we will have a few minutes left over, and I thought we'd take some questions from the audience. So let me bring it full circle. Let's go to the 28 Olympics. I mentioned that I've been coming here since 1985. I was brought here by a woman called Janet Marie Smith, who was this wonderful woman who was working on Pershing Square in downtown LA. And there was an exciting energy in the air because for the Olympics in '84, they had Pershing Square had been in a sort of slow, sad decline for many years, completely underused. I had turned around Bryant Park in Manhattan, very similar kind of size and square beauty. Bryant Park kept its sort of old beauty. Pershing Square had not, but it was not wildly dissimilar. So she asked me to come and think about what could happen with Pershing Square because the '84 Olympics had activated it and animated it and shown what the possibilities were, but it had been a temporary thing. But I can remember vividly feeling that the '84 Olympics had been this transformative moment for Los Angeles, that it was really the moment, in my view, that LA sort of took itself seriously as a true global city, not just a big kind of overgrown American metropolis, but really to be up there with London and Paris and New York and any other global city you wanted to mention. So for me, that Olympics, even in the sort of after echo of it, was kind of astonishing. As we now run up to the next one in 28, I wonder, how is that organizing your thinking about the city and what your plans are and initiatives are and so forth? Anybody like to jump in?
Well, so Los Angeles is, in fact, the host city. I mean, we have the relationship with the Olympic Organizing Committee, LA28. I think part of the vision of these Olympics is we're not going to build a lot of new stuff. We have a lot of stuff. We have lots of sports venues, lots of venues that will work. As the Athletes Village is going to be at UCLA, the Media Center is going to be at USC. So, I think learning the lessons of, London did a good job of sort of using the Olympics as an opportunity to redevelop a part of the city that had long been neglected. Rio didn't. It built a lot of kind of white elephants. So I think learning those lessons, using what we have, building temporary facilities, but one of the goals of the Olympic Organizing Committee in the city with the Olympic Organizing Committee is to also learn the lesson of LA84, which is you have to leave a legacy, a more sustainable Los Angeles, a more accessible Los Angeles, a more desirable destination Los Angeles. And I think as we all work hard over the next 5 years to make the Olympic Games a success, that we have to keep that vision in mind.
I think the fact that it's already been declared a car-free Olympics and Paralympics is extraordinary for LA. I think also there were just announced these federal grants to grow the grid, and we're putting the Olympics in places where our electrical grid is the oldest. And so being able to completely use this as a reason to restore and expand our grid and what the capacity is so that this can be a zero emissions Olympics is very exciting. And to have the access be about how we're going to look at managed lanes so that we can bring buses onto the freeways, that we can show people that you don't have to be a single occupant vehicle on the roads, that you can use roads differently. I think people are excited about being able to bike and take an electric bike to an Olympic venue. These are things that we need to be able to show in the ways that we are going to transform ourselves, how our city is going to be walkable, bikeable, clean, and multimodal in ways that no one ever thought possible in California, and certainly not in Los Angeles, and that legacy is going to be a multimodal city that we just are going to relate to so differently.
I think you're right. I think that's and that's obviously my hope. Right now, viewing the landscape now, I would have some question marks about whether that's all feasible. However, what I do know is that this summer we have the Paris Olympics. They're setting the bar pretty high for a lot of things. And I think the moment the Paris Olympics are over, and August 18th or whenever it is, I think things are really going to start happening big time here, which is my hope. Because as of now, I'm a little bit worried, but I think we have to let the Paris Olympics happen, and then it's really our turn, and it's the focus is on and the spotlight is on us. So.
Nothing beats a deadline and looking good for visitors, right, to get you going.
Well, that's no joke. I mean, I think the idea of the Olympics, it's going to have to open one way or there's like a Broadway show. The audience is coming and something's going to be there. So you really got to get your act together, one way or the other. So that's absolutely true. We have a few minutes left over. Are there some questions people would like to ask the panel? I see someone right here. Yeah.
Thank you. So when you're looking at, enacting new policy and affecting some of these changes, maybe this is particularly for Nancy, but then also on the permitting side, and when you're looking at spending money from the commission, how do you go about in a city like LA working with the other cities and the governmental structure and with unincorporated communities to look at the broad base changes to connect a community that large?
I think we do have a lot of regional cooperation and sort of built in. I mean, we have, Metro, LA Metro is a regional agency. Of course, our planning agency, SCAG, is a regional agency. Our water agency, Metropolitan Water District, I'm on the board of, is a regional agency. So I think we're sort of used to doing it. I do think that what Mayor Bass has said from day one around how we solve problems. It's really she always uses the phrase of locking arms because one of her first days in office she took the 3-minute walk from LA City Hall over the county administration building to go meet with the LA County supervisors, and I think it might have been the first time that it happened. So. We're all sharing this. We're all sharing this space. We're all sharing this community, and what happens in Los Angeles obviously has a huge impact on the rest of the county, and what happens in the county, what happens in the region has a huge impact here. So, I think it's really about sharing a sense of purpose and a sense of urgency to solve some of these. Very dramatic and difficult problems that have plagued this region for a long time, whether it's around mobility or housing or sustainability and maintaining a strong economy. We all have to do it together.
I think we have an amazing governor. And so the fact that Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom and the White House all get along, and you saw that in full force when the 10 caught on fire. I mean, Pete Buttigieg was on the phone with Mayor Bass, and the governor and Tokso Mishakin was here, who's the Secretary of Transportation, were here. There is a unity of purpose and commitment. And I think really what John's talking about is, what are our delivery models that really make good on, we have a great collective will, what's our collective delivery system and our implementation and procurement system so that we can deliver as ambitiously as our visions are. And I think that's something we really need to be working on, is how do we deliver? Because the political will has never been more in conjunction than it is right now.
It's great that the political will is there, but I operate at the lower level of permitting. So I'm working on a project for LAWA to get more planes in, to get more quality experience in. And I probably shouldn't say this, but we just got to get on and do it and beg for forgiveness, not ask for permission. And that's something in my industry, which is sad.
But
right?
I think there's been a real shift. I mean, I think there was a lot of the, slow growth, be deliberate about everything. And I think there is really, we see it, on housing, the mayor, her first executive orders around building of affordable low-income housing, affordable housing, and now trying to do both, how do we just housing production overall, and trying to cut through some of that, really self-imposed red tape, as Hilary was saying, the how people jumped into action to try to get the 10 freeway back open as quickly as possible really is gonna, I think it takes will, and it also just takes people deciding that we have to do it. And I think I think there's been a big policy shift, and you see it in Sacramento and some of the legislation. What a few years ago would have been unthinkable about changes in CEQA that are now more widely available in terms on the back end of CEQA to a whole bunch of different types of projects. I think there's a recognition among policymakers, certainly in LA and in California, that we have to get, as you said, get the job done.
And get it done with quality, James. So we mustn't overlook the fact that speed is not correlated to quality, and that's why the book looks at the typologies of Los Angeles, the courtyard house, the street house, the dump out house, downtown. How do we actually do it with quality? Needs everybody, Nancy, to get together and set standards, allow CoMotion and the mobility revolution to service it, and then you can, and allow policymakers and permitting agencies, if you're here today, to allow it to really streamline it and deliver the vision that the positivity of my colleagues have at this panel.